South Africa is an extraordinary country, filled with a complex and diverse history. From the earliest traces of prehistoric settlements to the courageous struggle against apartheid, the history of South Africa is a mixture of cultures, crucial events, and social transformations. In this article, we will explore the fascinating history of South Africa, from its ancestral roots to the present day, revealing remarkable moments, notable personalities, and the struggles for freedom and equality that shaped the South African nation.
The ancestral origins of South Africa date back millions of years, when the first human beings began to inhabit the region. Through archaeological and paleontological evidence, we can trace the evolution and migration of our ancestors across those ancient lands. Discoveries such as hominid fossils in the Sterkfontein Cave, in Gauteng province, have provided valuable clues about the early stages of human evolution. These fossils belong to the species Australopithecus africanus and date back approximately 2.5 to 2.8 million years. They show characteristics similar to those of modern human beings, but also distinctive traits of their primate ancestors. As evolution continued, other hominid species emerged, such as Homo habilis and the famous Homo naledi. These hominids demonstrate an increase in the sophistication and complexity of human behavior, developing tool-making skills and the ability to adapt to different environments. The Khoisan peoples, which include groups such as the San and Khoi, are considered the first inhabitants of South Africa. They are known for their rich cultural heritage and for practicing a nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Their ancestral presence in the region dates back thousands of years. As time passed, other migrations and interactions took place in the region, bringing diverse cultural and genetic influences. This included the arrival of Bantu peoples from Central Africa, who brought agricultural skills, established sedentary communities, and contributed to the development of more complex societies. The ancestral origins of South Africa are a mosaic of different ethnic groups, cultures, and traditions that have intertwined over the centuries. Understanding these origins is essential to appreciating and respecting the diversity and richness of the country's heritage, as well as understanding the identity and trajectory of the South African nation to this day.
The arrival of the Bantu peoples in South Africa marked a crucial moment in the history of the region. Around 2000 BC, significant migrations of Bantu groups from Central Africa began to take place, bringing with them a series of cultural, social, and linguistic changes. The Bantu peoples were skilled farmers, mastering techniques for cultivating foods such as cassava, maize, and beans. Their arrival in South Africa brought advanced agricultural knowledge, allowing the establishment of sedentary communities and the development of more sustainable agriculture. As they settled, the Bantu peoples also established more complex political and social systems. They organized themselves into clans and villages, with leaders who governed based on consensus and tradition. These social structures contributed to the formation of kingdoms and chiefdoms, where authority was exercised by chiefs and tribal leaders. In addition, the Bantu peoples brought their language with them, Bantu, which became the basis for many of the languages spoken in South Africa today. This linguistic spread reflects the broad influence and presence of the Bantu peoples in the region. The arrival of the Bantu peoples had a significant impact on the cultural and demographic landscape of South Africa. Their presence contributed to the country's ethnic and cultural diversity, laying the foundations for the formation of vibrant and distinct communities. It is important to emphasize that the arrival of the Bantu peoples also brought challenges and conflicts, as their migrations frequently overlapped with territories occupied by other ethnic groups. This resulted in tensions and territorial disputes that shaped the social and political dynamics of the region. The arrival of the Bantu peoples marked a crucial moment in the history of South Africa, representing a significant transformation in the lives of the peoples who inhabited the region. Their legacy is evident to this day, both in the country's cultural diversity and in the linguistic influence that permeates it. Understanding this historical stage is fundamental to appreciating the richness and complexity of South African history and the formation of its national identity.
The arrival of Europeans in South Africa marked a turning point in the history of the region. Beginning in the 15th century, European explorers and colonizers, such as the Portuguese, Dutch, and British, began establishing a presence in the area, bringing with them a series of changes that shaped the country's destiny. The Portuguese were the first Europeans to explore the South African coast, in search of a maritime route to the East Indies. Bartolomeu Dias was the first to round the Cape of Good Hope in 1488, paving the way for future expeditions. However, the Portuguese presence in the region was limited and did not result in effective colonization. It was with the Dutch East India Company that the European presence became more significant. In 1652, Jan van Riebeeck established a supply colony in Cape Town, known as the Cape Colony. This colony was intended to provide fresh food for ships passing the Cape of Good Hope on their way to the Far East. However, as Dutch settlers established themselves in the region, they came into conflict with indigenous communities and local tribes, such as the Khoisan peoples. These conflicts led to episodes of violence and territorial disputes, marking the beginning of a complex relationship between Europeans and Africans. Later, in the 19th century, South Africa became the subject of disputes among European colonial powers. The British took control of the Cape Colony in 1806 and expanded their rule to other regions, such as Natal, Transvaal, and the Orange Free State. The discovery of gold and diamonds in the region also attracted a significant influx of European immigrants seeking wealth. The European presence in South Africa had a profound impact on the country's society and culture. The establishment of colonies resulted in the introduction of new political systems, laws, and European institutions. In addition, European immigration brought cultural, linguistic, and religious influences that contributed to the nation's diversity. However, European colonization also brought apartheid, a system of racial segregation imposed by white South African governments during much of the 20th century. This discriminatory policy generated profound inequalities and racial conflicts, which were only overcome with the end of apartheid in 1994, with the rise of Nelson Mandela as president. The arrival of Europeans in South Africa had a lasting impact on the country's history, shaping its demographics, culture, and politics. Understanding this historical stage is essential to understanding the complexity of South African dynamics and the process of building the post-apartheid nation.
The Dutch settlement in South Africa marked the beginning of a lasting European presence in the region. In 1652, the Dutch East India Company established a supply colony in Cape Town, led by Jan van Riebeeck. This settlement, known as the Cape Colony, was intended to provide fresh supplies for ships sailing around the Cape of Good Hope toward the East Indies. Initially, the Dutch settlement focused on agriculture and trade. The settlers cultivated foods such as wheat, vegetables, and fruit, establishing commercial relations with local indigenous peoples and with ships passing through the region. The colony gradually grew, with the arrival of more settlers and the establishment of farms around Cape Town. However, as the Dutch settlers expanded their territories, they came into conflict with indigenous communities and local tribes, such as the Khoisan peoples. These conflicts led to episodes of violence and territorial disputes, resulting in constant tensions between the settlers and the native peoples. In addition, the Dutch settlement in South Africa also brought the introduction of the Afrikaans language and culture, which developed from Dutch with influences from the Khoisan and other African languages. Afrikaans became one of the country's official languages and played an important role in the formation of South African cultural identity. Over the years, the Dutch settlement evolved into a more established colony, with its own administration, laws, and system of government. However, the Dutch presence was challenged by other European colonial powers, particularly the British, who sought to expand their influence in the region. At the beginning of the 19th century, the British took control of the Cape Colony, and the Dutch presence was gradually replaced by British rule. This period marked a transition in the history of South Africa, as the country came to be governed by the British and later faced political and social challenges related to apartheid. The Dutch settlement in South Africa left a lasting legacy in the country's history, influencing its culture, language, and social relations. Understanding this historical period is essential to understanding the roots of South African society and its current dynamics.
British colonization in South Africa brought a new phase in the country's history, leaving a significant impact on its politics, economy, and society. During the 19th century, the British established their rule over the region, resulting in profound and often conflict-ridden transformations. British colonization began with the occupation of the Cape Colony in 1795, during the Napoleonic Wars. The British sought to expand their control over maritime trade in the region, as well as establish a strategic base along the route to India. From then on, the British presence in South Africa gradually became consolidated. One of the main consequences of British colonization was the implementation of policies that deeply affected the local population. The British introduced laws and practices that restricted the rights of indigenous peoples, such as the Natives' Land Act of 1913, which limited access to land and promoted racial segregation. British colonization also brought the imposition of English culture and language, which came to play a dominant role in public life, administration, and the educational system. English became one of the country's official languages and had a lasting impact on South Africa's social structure and cultural identity. In addition, British colonization in South Africa was marked by conflicts and tensions with Dutch settlers, known as Afrikaners. The Second Boer War, 1899 to 1902, a conflict between the British and the Afrikaners, was one of the most significant events of this period, with lasting consequences for ethnic and political relations in the country. British colonization also stimulated South Africa's economic development, particularly in mining and industrialization. The discovery of gold and diamonds in the region attracted foreign investment and led to the growth of cities such as Johannesburg and Kimberley. However, British colonization also resulted in profound social and economic inequalities, with the majority of the African population being marginalized and deprived of their rights. These injustices contributed to the later struggle against apartheid and the pursuit of equality and justice in South Africa. In summary, British colonization left a complex legacy in South African history. Although it brought economic development and governmental institutions, it also perpetuated social inequalities and injustices. Understanding this period is essential to understanding the country's political and social dynamics and its ongoing search for reconciliation and social justice.
Apartheid was a system of institutionalized racial segregation in South Africa that lasted from 1948 to 1994. This discriminatory policy, implemented by the National Party government, divided the South African population according to race, promoting white supremacy and denying basic rights to the non-white majority. Under apartheid, laws were enacted to reinforce the separation between whites and non-whites in all areas of social life, including housing, education, healthcare, transportation, and employment. Black people, as the majority of the population, were subjected to a regime of oppression and discrimination, being deprived of their civil, political, and social rights. Apartheid laws included the pass, which required black people to carry an identification document specifying where they could live and work. This resulted in the forced removal of millions of people from their homes and communities, leading to the creation of segregated neighborhoods known as townships. Schools were also segregated, with quality education reserved exclusively for whites. This policy sought to perpetuate social inequality and limit educational opportunities for the non-white majority. Access to healthcare services, skilled employment, and political participation was also restricted on the basis of race. Resistance to apartheid was constant, led by prominent figures such as Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Oliver Tambo, and many others. The struggle against apartheid took various forms, from peaceful demonstrations to more radical actions, such as the formation of the African National Congress, ANC, and the creation of armed resistance groups such as Umkhonto we Sizwe. International pressure also played an important role in combating apartheid. Economic sanctions and international boycotts were imposed on South Africa, intensifying pressure on the government and increasing global awareness of the injustice of the system. The end of apartheid came with the election of Nelson Mandela as the first black president of South Africa in 1994. This historic milestone ushered in a new era of democracy, racial equality, and social justice. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, established to investigate human rights violations committed during apartheid, played a crucial role in the search for reconciliation and national healing. Apartheid left a lasting legacy in South Africa. Despite the achievements made since the end of this oppressive regime, the country still faces significant challenges in terms of social inequality, poverty, and racial reconciliation. However, the the struggle against apartheid and the transition to democracy serve as a powerful reminder of the power of people to seek freedom, equality, and justice.
Nelson Mandela, South African leader and global icon of the struggle against apartheid, played a fundamental role in the resistance and the pursuit of racial equality. His dedication to the cause of freedom and his peaceful yet determined stance transformed him into a symbol of hope and inspiration for millions of people around the world. Mandela emerged as a prominent figure in the anti-apartheid movement during the 1950s, when he joined the African National Congress, ANC, and became involved in protest activities against the discriminatory policies of the South African government. He was one of the key leaders in organizing the Defiance Campaign, which sought to challenge apartheid laws through peaceful civil disobedience. In 1962, Mandela was arrested and sentenced to life imprisonment for conspiring to overthrow the government. During his 27 years of imprisonment, he became a symbol of resistance and the struggle for justice. Even behind bars, Mandela continued to be a powerful voice, defending racial equality and reconciliation. After his release in 1990, Mandela played a crucial role in the negotiations that led to the end of apartheid. He led the ANC in negotiations with the government and worked closely with President Frederick de Klerk to establish a peaceful transition to democracy. In 1994, Mandela made history by becoming the first black president of South Africa, marking the official end of apartheid. During his term, he worked tirelessly to promote national reconciliation and combat the deeply rooted inequalities in the country. His leadership approach, based on forgiveness, understanding, and the pursuit of national unity, was an inspiring example for everyone. Mandela was also an advocate for human rights and social justice on a global scale. He worked to promote peace and resolve conflicts in various regions of the world, and his legacy as a leader and defender of human rights earned him international recognition and respect. Nelson Mandela was much more than a political leader. He became a symbol of resistance, perseverance, and hope. His courage and dedication to the cause of racial equality left a lasting legacy not only in South Africa but throughout the world. His story continues to inspire future generations to fight for a fairer and more inclusive world.
Resistance movements played a significant role in the struggle against apartheid in South Africa. With their determination and courage, these movements sought to challenge the oppressive policies of the South African government and promote racial equality and social justice. One of the most influential movements was the African National Congress, ANC, led by iconic figures such as Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, and Walter Sisulu. The ANC adopted an approach of non-violent resistance, promoting acts of civil disobedience and peaceful protests to draw attention to the injustices of apartheid. Its strategy aimed to mobilize the population and raise international awareness about the situation in South Africa. In addition to the ANC, other movements and organizations also stood out in the struggle against apartheid. The Black Consciousness Movement, led by Steve Biko, played a fundamental role by promoting awareness and self-esteem among the black population, encouraging them to resist oppression and demand their rights. Women also played a vital role in resistance to apartheid. Organizations such as the Federation of South African Women and the Black Women's Movement were crucial in mobilizing women and advocating for gender and racial equality. Other movements and groups, such as the South African Communist Party and the United Democratic Front, also joined the struggle against apartheid. These movements sought to promote solidarity among different groups and establish alliances to strengthen collective resistance. The resistance movements faced violent repression by the South African government, including the imposition of emergency laws and mass arrests. However, their determination and growing popular support did not waver. The resistance continued to gain strength, driven by the desire for freedom and justice. These resistance movements, through their courage and commitment, were crucial to achieving freedom and democracy in South Africa. Their actions and sacrifices helped awaken global awareness of the injustices of apartheid and put pressure on the country for significant changes. The legacy of these resistance movements is a lasting reminder of the importance of unity, courage, and the struggle for equality and justice. They inspire not only South Africa but people around the world to confront oppression, challenge injustice, and fight for a fairer and more inclusive world.
The end of apartheid marked a crucial point in South African history, representing a significant achievement in the struggle for equality and justice. After decades of racial oppression and segregation, the country took an important step toward reconciliation and the construction of a more inclusive society. The process of ending apartheid was driven by a combination of factors, including international pressure, internal resistance, and negotiations between the government and anti-apartheid organizations. A fundamental milestone in this process was the release of Nelson Mandela in 1990, after 27 years in prison. His leadership and vision played a crucial role in the peaceful transition and the pursuit of national reconciliation. In 1994, South Africa held its first multiracial democratic elections, in which all citizens had the right to vote. Nelson Mandela was elected as the country's first black president, marking a historic moment of change and hope. The post-apartheid government began a process of national reconciliation and implemented policies of inclusion and equality, seeking to overcome the divisions of the past and build a united nation. The end of apartheid was also accompanied by the creation of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, chaired by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. This commission was responsible for investigating and documenting human rights violations committed during the apartheid period, with the aim of promoting healing, justice, and reconciliation. The process was fundamental to confronting the wounds of the past and opening the way toward a more inclusive and tolerant society. Although the end of apartheid was an important milestone, South Africa still faces challenges related to social, economic, and racial inequality. The legacy of apartheid left deep scars on society, which need to be addressed through policies of inclusion, empowerment, and social justice. The pursuit of equality and the construction of a united nation remain central goals for South Africa. The end of apartheid in South Africa is a powerful reminder of the importance of perseverance, dialogue, and collective struggle for human rights and equality. It represents a significant chapter in the country's history and serves as an inspiration for confronting social challenges and seeking a fairer and more inclusive society not only in South Africa but around the world.
Nelson Mandela, one of the most emblematic figures of the 20th century, played a transformative role in South African history as a leader of the struggle against apartheid and the country's first black president. His journey is marked by courage, resilience, and dedication to the pursuit of justice and equality. After spending 27 years in prison for his activities against the apartheid regime, Nelson Mandela was released in 1990. His release marked a historic moment and one of great hope for the South African people, who saw him as a symbol of resistance and the possibility of change. In 1994, Nelson Mandela became the first black president of South Africa following the country's multiracial democratic elections. His election symbolized the overcoming of racial divisions and the beginning of a new chapter in the country's history. During his presidential term, which lasted from 1994 to 1999, Nelson Mandela led efforts to promote national reconciliation and build a fairer and more inclusive society. He advocated the idea of a rainbow nation, in which people of different ethnic and racial backgrounds could coexist harmoniously. As president, Mandela implemented policies aimed at reconciliation and the country's social and economic development. He established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which investigated human rights abuses committed during apartheid and promoted a process of healing and justice. In addition to his political actions, Nelson Mandela also stood out as an advocate for human rights and equality on a global level. His leadership inspired people around the world, and he became an iconic figure in the struggle against oppression and discrimination. After leaving the presidency, Nelson Mandela continued his humanitarian work, dedicating himself to causes such as fighting poverty, education, and HIV/AIDS prevention. His legacy as a statesman and defender of human rights endures to this day, and he is revered as one of the great leaders in history. Nelson Mandela left a lasting legacy of hope, reconciliation, and commitment to democratic values. His vision of a united and equitable South Africa continues to inspire future generations to seek social justice and promote equality throughout the world.
After the end of apartheid, South Africa faced the monumental challenge of rebuilding a nation torn apart by decades of racial segregation and oppression. The transition to democracy brought hope for a more inclusive and equal future, but it also required confronting a series of complex challenges. The reconstruction of South Africa involved the implementation of comprehensive policies focused on reconciliation, social justice, and economic development. The government adopted measures to promote the inclusion of marginalized groups, such as Black people and disadvantaged communities, through economic empowerment programs and affirmative action. However, Reconstruction also brought significant socio-economic challenges to the forefront. Persistent inequality, widespread poverty, and unemployment were crucial obstacles to be overcome. The government worked to implement income redistribution policies and socio-economic development programs aimed at reducing disparities and improving the living conditions of the population. Another challenge was national reconciliation and healing the wounds of the past. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, established during Mandela's presidency, played a fundamental role in addressing human rights abuses committed during apartheid. This initiative promoted the search for truth, justice, and reconciliation, allowing victims to share their stories and perpetrators to be held accountable for their actions. In addition, South Africa had to deal with challenges in the areas of education, healthcare, and infrastructure. Significant investments were made to improve access to quality education, expand the healthcare system, and strengthen the country's infrastructure. Despite the progress achieved, the reconstruction of South Africa is an ongoing process. The nation still faces persistent challenges, such as high crime rates, socio-economic inequality, and racial tensions. The pursuit of a truly inclusive and equitable society requires an ongoing commitment to justice, equality, and reconciliation. The reconstruction of South Africa is a powerful reminder of the strength of human resilience and determination. Despite the challenges it has faced, the nation has worked to build a better future for all its citizens, based on the principles of equality, justice, and human dignity.
The art and architecture of South Africa reflect the country's rich cultural diversity and fascinating history. With a fusion of African, European, and indigenous influences, South African artistic expression encompasses a wide range of styles and forms. Traditional African art is characterized by wood sculptures, ceramic artifacts, rock paintings, and decorative textiles. These artistic expressions are often inspired by nature, spirituality, and cultural rituals, conveying symbolic messages and preserving the cultural identity of local communities. South African architecture is marked by a mixture of styles, from traditional rural houses to modern skyscrapers in the cities. European influences can be seen in historic buildings, such as churches, castles, and colonial houses. On the other hand, contemporary architecture seeks to incorporate indigenous and sustainable elements, reflecting environmental awareness and respect for cultural heritage. Also noteworthy are impressive modern structures such as the iconic FNB Stadium, designed for the 2010 World Cup, and the Durban International Convention Centre complex. These buildings represent South Africa's ability to embrace architectural innovation and host major international events. In addition, South Africa is known for its vibrant artistic communities, art galleries, and cultural festivals. Cities such as Johannesburg, Cape Town, and Durban are home to a dynamic art scene, where contemporary South African artists display their works and address social, political, and cultural issues. Music plays an important role in South African culture, with varied musical genres such as jazz, kwaito, mbube, and traditional African genres. Dance is also a highly valued form of artistic expression, with styles such as gumboot dance, traditional Zulu dance, and contemporary South African dance, which combine elements of tradition and modernity. South Africa is a true artistic and architectural treasure, where creativity is deeply rooted in the country's cultural heritage. Through art and architecture, the South African nation celebrates its diversity, expresses its identities, and shares its stories with the world.
South Africa is a country known for its incredible cultural diversity, which reflects the richness and complexity of its history and population. With more than 11 officially recognized ethnic groups and a variety of cultural influences, the country stands out as a true melting pot of traditions, languages, beliefs, and cultural practices. Each ethnic group contributes its own distinct cultural traditions, resulting in a vibrant cultural tapestry. The major ethnic groups include the Zulu, Xhosa, Afrikaner, Sotho, Tswana, and Venda, among others. Each group has its own language, customs, rituals, and unique artistic expressions. This cultural diversity can be seen in traditional celebrations, festivals, and cultural events held throughout the country. For example, the Zulu Reed Dance Festival, which celebrates virginity and Zulu culture, and the Cape Town Carnival, with its African and Brazilian influences, are just some examples of how cultural traditions are celebrated and preserved. South African cuisine also reflects this diversity, with a mixture of flavors and dishes originating from different culinary traditions. From the traditional cuisine of African peoples to European and Asian influences brought by colonizers and immigrants, South African cuisine offers a wide variety of unique dishes and flavors. In addition, music and dance are important forms of cultural expression in South Africa. Musical genres such as Marabi, Mbakanga, Kwaito, and the famous South African gospel genre have deep roots in the country's culture. Traditional dances such as gumboot dance, pansela, and inlamu are forms of expression that represent the cultural identity of different ethnic groups. South Africa's cultural diversity is a national treasure that enriches the country's identity and strengthens the sense of unity and pride among its population. Valuing and preserving this diversity is essential for building an inclusive society in which all voices and cultural traditions are respected and celebrated.
In conclusion, South Africa has a rich and complex history, full of challenges, transformations, and achievements. From its ancestral origins to modern times, the country has gone through various periods of colonization, struggles for freedom, and the pursuit of equality. Apartheid marked a dark chapter in South African history, but the end of this oppressive system and the rise of visionary leaders such as Nelson Mandela brought hope and promoted national reconciliation. South Africa's cultural diversity, artistic and architectural richness, and famous personalities further enrich the country's legacy. Today, the nation is committed to building a prosperous future, facing social, economic, and environmental challenges with resilience and determination. The history of South Africa teaches us about the importance of perseverance, social justice, and the pursuit of a more equal world.